Are you looking for ideas to keep your projects from going over budget and time? Are you looking for ideas on how to speed up your projects? Then this is the channel for you. Hello and welcome to the Faster Projects channel. My name is Henry Johnson. Now today we're going to tackle the resource optimization model. We're going to look at how changes in demand for resources impacts our efficiency. Now there's a lot of literature out there on adjusting the number of resources to match demand and capacity. This is known as resource leveling. Now that's all fine, but in this presentation we're going to look at this problem from another perspective. We're going to see that once the resource levels are set, that this is just the beginning. Now here is a traditional view of how the number of resources impacts efficiency. What we see at the lower end, there are just not enough resources to get the work done on time. Now we keep adding more resources until we reach a sweet spot where we are the most efficient. And as we continue to add more resources, efficiency starts to drop again. The assumption is that they're starting to get in each other's way. However, this is not reality. We are usually given resources as part of a core team or on a rotating basis from a pool of shared resources. Now our job as a project manager is to optimize the use of these resources as the demand for them rapidly changes from day to day and sometimes hour to hour. So we really needed a new model based on this change in demand. And here it is. The first thing we see is that the sweet spot is a narrow peak. This means it is extremely difficult to keep ourselves at the highest efficiency. We have to work at it. With just a small change in demand, we fall off to one side or the other. Now we purposely drew this model to be symmetric. It has been based on 30 years of observing team dynamics. At the lower end, demand exceeds resource level and we start to multitask, omit steps, take risky shortcuts to get the work done. And at the high end, demand drops and we find ourselves with a high level of resources compared to the demand. We know this is a temporary event, so we retain our resources and keep them busy. But the bottom line is they are not working on the main project. Now there are two more very important lessons to be learned from this model. At the top, we did not claim to be 100% efficient. In fact, we may only be 10 to 30% efficient. It's also important to note that efficiency has a time element to it. Efficiency decreases over time if left unchecked. Now we're going to look at this in a future video. Also, at the bottom of the model, efficiency goes negative. Now I think that's something new. This means that not only are tasks taking longer, but we are starting to move backwards. So the notion of taking one step forward and two steps back really happens, and it happens more than we think. All of this helps explain why we see projects go so far over budget and schedule. So let's look at a typical example. This may help us understand the model. Now, what I'm going to look at is a typical work week. At least it was for many of my projects. So we'll start on Monday. Great, everything's on track. Tuesday comes with a surprise all-hands meeting. Your team is pulled into a room for 2 hours. This causes demand on these resources to suddenly drop because they're sitting idle. After the all-hands meeting, resources return back to your project. Great. However, now we find ourselves on the other side of the curve. We haven't been given any relief on schedule because management sees this as a one-time event. So the team struggles to complete tasks with less time in the day. They start to multitask or they look for shortcuts. On Wednesday, the customer requests an estimate for a scope change. The team is pulled off their main task to work on the estimate. This takes most of the day, and again, we find demand from the main task dropping below resource levels, just like we had in the meeting. Can you guess what's going to come next? Yes, the team returns back to the main task. And yes, once again, they are not giving any relief on schedule, so we find ourselves with even less time and more work to stay on schedule. So now we really have to find workarounds, shortcuts, and multitask. All this is lowering our efficiency. The customer agrees to adding the new scope, but not any schedule relief. It just always seems to be this thinking that this is a one-time event and somehow we have baked this in as a margin in our original estimates. Does this sound familiar? Now the team discovers a problem, and the fix requires reworking some of the tasks already completed. The team is suddenly overwhelmed with new work. Without knowing it, we have fallen into the negative efficiency zone. So as a good project manager, you update your cost and schedule. These new projections take us way over budget and schedule. Now this projection kicks off panic, and management throws resources at the problem. Again, without knowing it, we have plunged into the negative efficiency zone. The team is now overwhelmed with new people, and they have to bring them up to speed. In order to do this, we have to stop working on the main problem. Now we have resources working on non-value-added tasks that are beyond the scope of our project. They're training, mentoring, and organizing the new resources. Now, have you had any of these experiences? So what can we do to lessen the impact of changing demand? Well, this really happens at two levels, at the project level and the organizational level. So let's start with the project level, because this is something you can do right away, and because organizational changes are much harder to make. So the first thing is, don't use meetings for status. You can find alternative ways. You can send out emails, have a newsletter that's a common area that people go find on their own. And really, if you're going to have a meeting, change it to be a workshop, so you actually accomplish something. These workshops are great for design reviews and document sign-ups, things like that you need everybody involved with. Now also, we really want to be prioritizing deliverables and empower the team to change priorities when they hit roadblocks. We don't want them waiting for anything, so if they have to, they can move to the next task. We need to assign owners to deliverables. This will reduce the number and severity of late errors because ownership drives completeness, and it also eliminates gaps. We need to decouple deliverables from any other deliverables whenever possible. We want to be able to work on them without impacting other tasks. This is especially good at eliminating waiting on other tasks to complete before you complete your own task. Now, we also do not multitask. This sounds good, but in practice it can lead to switching delays when you close out and set up for the next task. In software, this is commonly called context switching and can quickly account for most of the time spent working. So now for the more difficult task of lessening demand switching at the organizational level. Change at the organizational level is often slow and politically charged. But for those interested in change, here are my recommendations. First and foremost, measure efficiency. But be careful to measure what really counts. For example, measuring cost is not productive. It's okay to report it, but cost is really an effect, not a cause. So stick to what is really driving efficiency. Efficiency drifts down over time, so plan to keep it regularly in check. Do not assume you have a perfect system, process, or tools. They all need constant maintenance to run smoothly. Also, transform unknowns into knowns using experiments and minimal viable products as soon as you can. That way you really know what you're dealing with, you can schedule, and you can cost it effectively. Now, we also manage the pipeline of projects to prevent exceeding capacity. But it's also critical to manage the number and type of projects in the pipeline. For example, if you have too many high-risk projects, they can suddenly consume the entire company. I've seen this happen more than once. So spread the resources out across improvement projects, platform upgrades, and new products or services. There's also a special recipe. That percentage that you should have to each of these should be something you need to have as identified in your company. So if you have any questions about these, please put them in a comment below. And again, thank you for watching today.